How many of you have ever watched a movie or read a story that at the very end gave you a twist or a detail that just completely changed the way you would have watched the movie or read the story beforehand? A classic example of that is a movie from my childhood called The Sixth Sense. It's a psychological thriller, and just so you know, this movie is over 20 years old, which makes me feel old, and it means that if I spoil it for you this morning, that's not on me. That's on you. Movie's from like 1997, all right? So The Sixth Sense is a movie about a psychologist who is helping a child that claims that he can see dead people. And as the movie goes along, you begin to realize that the psychologist is not helping a child who's hallucinating. The psychologist is actually working with a child who can actually see dead people. And the psychologist realizes that this child's role in life is to help those dead people overcome different things from their old life to move into the next one. Not an accurate reflection of how things really are, obviously, but this is the plot of the movie. Now, as the movie goes along, you're kind of in this weird place because the psychologist is doing a lot of good things for the boy, but he's ruining everything else in his life. He's having these really cold and distant conversations with his wife. He's having some really weird interactions with the boy's mother that don't seem to make any sense. And you kind of get the impression that this psychologist, while doing all kinds of good stuff for the boy, can't handle anything else in his life until the very end of the movie when you realize that one of the dead people the boy can see is the psychologist. At least that's what my head did. Like, I was one of those people that didn't see the twist coming, and immediately you're like, whoa, the whole movie makes total sense. And it's really different now. Like you go back to it, and it's like, he wasn't being a jerk to his wife. He wasn't talking to his wife. He was dead, and she was just trying to get over his death. He wasn't having weird conversations with the boy's mother because he wasn't talking to the mother. In fact, I watched The Sixth Sense for a second time, and it was like I was watching a completely different movie. Because I had this detail, because I knew what was going to happen at the end. And this is what John is going to do for us today, although it's not going to seem like it. It's going to seem like John is coming out of left field with this really weird thing that doesn't make any sense, but I promise you that's not what he's doing. So I'm going to stop trying to build this. Let's just see how John ends the letter. Here's what John writes under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit in 1 John chapter 5, verses 20 and 21. He says, "We know also that the Son of God has come and has given us understanding so that we may know him who is true. And we are in him who is true by being in his Son, Jesus Christ. He is the true God and eternal life. Dear children, keep yourselves from idols." That last verse, dear children, keep yourselves from idols, it just feels like a squirrel moment from John. Because if you've been tracking with us in this series, John has said nothing about idols up until this point. Not mentioned them one time. And then all of a sudden, he closes the letter with this phrase, "Dear children, keep yourselves from idols." And you're just wondering, did he forget to talk about that? Did he get to the point where he said, "Oh, I'm running out of space and time, but I forgot to talk about idols, so I'm just going to chuck this in here at the end so I can get it in there." But that's not what's happening. I promise you, John's not playing a trick on us. He's not having a squirrel moment. He's not thinking, "Oh boy, I forgot that. I better write that down while I have a chance." What he's doing is he's masterfully giving us a new wrinkle that helps us look back over everything we've seen in his letter and see it in a different light. And so that I don't pull a John on you this morning, I just want to show you exactly where we're going so that we're all on the same page. Here's the biggest thing I want you to remember from our time together today, and that is that God has revealed himself to us through Jesus, who is the one true God. That's the biggest thing I want you to remember. And by the way, that's my outline for all my type A friends out there, okay? Right? First of all, God has revealed himself to us. Secondly, he's revealed himself to us through Jesus. Thirdly, who is the one true God. So let's dive into this so I can show you what I mean. The first thing that I want us to see this morning is that God has revealed himself to us. Look with me back at verse 20. We read, "We know also that the Son of God has come and has given us understanding so that we may know him who is true." This sentence in our passage is getting to a really simple idea that God has made himself known to us. God has made it possible for us to know who he is. We don't have to wonder about God. We don't have to guess who he is, what his character is like, what he wants from us, or what his plans are for the world. No, God has clearly revealed those things to us. We don't have to go through painstaking, long conversations, hoping that God will let his guard down and let us in on who he is and not lie to us during the process, which is really how we get to know each other as human beings, right? Like if I'm sitting down and I've just met you and I'm trying to get to know you, I'm trying to figure out whatever it is that you'll reveal to me. I'm looking at your finger to see if you have a wedding ring, to try to figure out if you're married. I'm trying to figure out what you do for an occupation by asking you what your job is. I'm making all kinds of judgments about your taste based on your favorite sports team or your favorite foods. But the simple reality is that I'm not going to be able to get to know you any deeper than what you're willing to show me. In fact, the people that you know the deepest in your life are those who are willing to open themselves up and reveal everything about themselves to you in a way that they don't put up any guards and they don't lie to you or try to deceive you about who they are. And that's exactly what God has done for us. Like God has completely opened himself up to us. He has revealed himself in all of his fullness and all of his goodness so that we don't have to wonder if he's withholding information or if there's something about him that we don't know. Instead, we get the opportunity to know God as fully and deeply as we possibly can by spending time with him and getting to know him. Like, make no mistake about it, there is no hidden information when it comes to God. He has clearly revealed himself to you, and that is an amazing thing when you realize that he didn't have to. Let me say that again. God did not have to reveal himself to you. And what makes that so amazing is you can tell a lot about a person by what they're willing to do that they don't have to. In fact, one of the ways that you can tell how much someone really loves you or not is by the things they're willing to do for you that they don't have to. I've been thinking about this when it comes to my wife, and I've just been thinking about all the simple things that she does for me that she really doesn't have to, but she does because she loves me. Because I'd be a mess if she didn't do the, like, for example, laundry. My wife doesn't have to do my laundry. It's not like we stood there on our wedding day and she looked at me and said, I vow to make sure that your laundry is always done. Like that just wasn't part of our wedding ceremony. Like we could have his and hers laundry baskets and mine would constantly be overflowing onto the floor. I'd be running out of clean underwear, like doing the sniff test on shirts and things like that. But I don't have to go through that in life because my wife willingly does my laundry along with hers and the kids when she doesn't have to. It's the same thing with cooking meals. It's the same thing with shopping. It's the same thing with so many little simple things that my wife does not have to do for me, but because she loves me, she does them. Which is why when you begin to think about the things that God is willing to do for you that he doesn't have to, it will make you praise and love him all the more. God did not have to reveal himself to us. He didn't have to make himself known for several reasons. Let me just give you two. The first reason that God didn't have to reveal himself to us is because we rejected him. God created us to have a relationship with him, to rule over creation on his behalf, and we responded by rejecting that. We responded by rejecting that relationship. We responded by refusing to rule over creation on God's behalf and decided that we were going to rule over creation and our lives on our own behalf instead of God. And here's the thing, God could have responded in kind. Like he could have looked at us and said, fine, you don't want a relationship with me, you don't want to rule on my behalf the way I've created you to do so, then I'll give you what you want. I will withdraw from you, I will pull back, you will never hear from me again, which is essentially what every single one of us want in our sin-stained hearts. It's the idea that we don't want an existence with God. This is what sin is. It's us claiming God's throne and wanting nothing to do with him. And God could have done the exact same thing to us and said, I want nothing to do with you in response. God didn't have to reveal himself to us because we rejected him. And secondly, he doesn't have to reveal himself to us because every time he does, God has to condescend. What I mean by that is that every time that God communicates with us, he reveals himself to us, he has to do so in terms and in ways that are below how great God is. I love how a Dutch reformer, John Calvin, talks about it, and he's Dutch, which means all y'all will love him. He talks about it this way. He says that when God communicates to us, he has to use baby talk. That God is so awesome and so great and so big that when he communicates to us, he has to talk to us like he's trying to talk to babies. He has to use baby talk, like broken grammar, like think Yoda from Star Wars. That's how God has to communicate with us. He has to talk to us in that little voice that you wouldn't talk to another human being unless you're trying to mock them, unless they're a baby, right? Like, oh, aren't you so cute? You're such a cute. Like, you do that to someone who's a grown adult, them's fighting words, right? But it's cool when you're talking to a baby. Like, he's using words that we would use that don't mean what they, like, I remember this one time. My son wanted a snack, and he walked up to me, and I said, what do you want, buddy? And he said, Chi-nuts. What? Like, I had no idea what Chi-nuts meant. So I took him to the cupboard, opened it up, and I said, son, point to what you want. And he pointed to a box of Cheez-Its, and he said, Chi-nuts. So for months in my house, Cheez-Its were Chi-nuts, because that's what my son understood Cheez-Its to be, and my wife and I thought it was pretty hilarious. That's how God has to communicate with us. He's using words like Chi-nuts. He's talking in baby talk because his greatness is so awesome that just to communicate with us in terms that we would understand, he has to condescend to something that's below him. But despite our rejection and his condescension, God has revealed himself. He didn't have to do it. He had so many good reasons why he would never be required to show us who he is, to communicate with us in any way, shape, or form, but he has done so anyway, revealing the kind of God that he is and just how much he loves us. And what I want you to see, I want you to catch a glimpse of the God who is just revealed to us in 1 John. I'm not even talking the whole of the scriptures. Just look at the God who's revealed himself to us in 1 John. One of the things we learn about God in 1 John is that he is light. If you remember back in chapter 1, verse 5, we read this. This is the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. What it means for John to say that God is light is that he's getting at the purity of God. To say that God is light is to use a metaphor to say that God is everything that light brings into our world. God is attractive as light is attractive. He's illuminating as light is illuminating, showing us things that we can't see. He's a warming force when we're cold. He's a force that can shine into darkness and overcome it in a way that cannot be conquered or found victory over. This is what it means when we say that God is light. And when we have a relationship with him, we get to have all those things that light is brought into our lives because of our relationship with God. He's not only revealed as light, though, he's also revealed as truth. If you look at 1 John chapter 5, verse 6, we're told that one of the titles of the third person of the triune God of the universe and the Holy Spirit is the truth. Just in the couple verses we read this morning, there are 2 times where God is referred to as true. And when we say God is truth, what we mean is that God is trustworthy, that he is just, that he is good, that he is right, that everything that God says is true and right and good and will ultimately work out for the ultimate good of our lives and his plans for the world. And he's trustworthy in the sense that you can believe that God's not going to change his mind, that he's not going to say one thing at one point in your life and then say the opposite thing later on, because God is the truth. And we also see in 1 John that not only is God light and is he truth, but he's love. 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 and 8 says this, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever doesn't love God does not know God, because God is love." And later on in chapter 4, verse 16, it says, "God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them." God is love. This means that he's kind, that he's gracious, that he's patient, that he's selfless, that he's welcoming, and he's accepting. God is everything that love is, and to experience God in your life is to experience love itself. These 3 things, this is just a snapshot of who God is as revealed to us in 1 John. Now, here's what I think that should do, really practically, for every single one of us. What it should do is inspire thankfulness in our hearts. We should be thankful because this beautiful God did not have to reveal himself to us, but instead of withholding himself the way he could have, he's shown himself to us in all of his beauty and his glory and invited us into a relationship with him.